So one of the things I figured out a long time ago is that it is a waste of time to try and tell a state court judge that he's wrong, because they know they're wrong. They already know that they're breaking the law. They don't care because they have what's called immunity, and they think they can get away with it because they think they have immunity for everything, including screwing us to death. But they don't.
Yes.
So what's going on is we've been looking at this. The first week was just, man, this is a shit show. And it goes back to Title 4D. And then last week, I'm sorry I didn't get to spend more time with you because I would have loved to just tear that up. But Don did a really good presentation about the crazy bug-eyed whack-doodle shit show crazy that they used in his own experience, and that it has impacted so many other veterans. This morning, Don and I watched a case in Tennessee online, Court of Appeals, and they didn't seem to comprehend the tiniest little bit of what the law actually says about the difference between combat-related special compensation, VA benefits, and, of course, retired pay. And the attorneys really didn't get any good information on the table that would have been helpful. And the judges basically proved their total ignorance, disregard, disrespect for the law, because they're just doing their thing.
All right. A judge cannot pull ignorance, because if I step in front of a judge and I say, I didn't know that was illegal, ignorance of the law is no excuse. Therefore, judges should not fall back on that excuse either.
The problem becomes who is going to hold that judge accountable. And I've seen that in not only family law, but in corporate law and in personal injury law as well. Look, one of the things that I encountered when I started working in law back in 2006, I was asked to administer the courses that a couple of senior attorneys put together, because they were receiving new attorneys out of Brown, Yale, Stanford, and highly accredited universities who couldn't put together a functional sentence. So there is nothing that should lead us to believe that any of these people knows anything about the law beyond the basics. They don't know.
That being said, this is a very, very simple thing. But we've got 30 years of predatory corruption and millions of pages of frivolous litigation complicating it. There's a whole lot of attorney feces out there, and I guarantee you half of judicial bias is caused by a chronic overexposure to attorney feces. What we're looking at,
I like that.
Oh, you got that one. So what we're looking at is a long history of BS. And like I said, it's a waste of time to argue with a state court judge in his own territory because he thinks he can get away with it. So the place to go is the federal court. If you want to take a judge and get him in trouble, you take him to the federal court under the 14th Amendment. Section 1983 of Title 42 says that you can sue a judge for due process of law. Remember, in the previous episode, I described due process as being you make a written list of each law that applies to each of the people in the court, and then you make sure that whatever the court is doing, whatever the judge is doing, is not breaking those laws, hurting those people, because they have rights. Individual rights can be enforced. So the 14th Amendment says that no state shall make or enforce any law that shall abridge the rights of the citizens. And no state shall deprive anyone of life, liberty, or property without due process of law and equal protection of the law. So we have the ability, based on our Constitution, to take judges to federal court and say, hey, remind the judge that the law says I have these federal rights, and the judge has to obey those federal rights. That is enforcement of due process of law. Here's the kicker. if you can prove that the judge has no possibility of jurisdiction on the subject matter, then the judge has no immunity. So where we're looking at the subject matter of veteran benefits, just veteran benefits, Title 38, Congress puts money out through Title 38 for the VA to spend taking care of us. And that money is controlled by a law that says it could not possibly end up in the jurisdiction of the state.
Right.
Congress has defined every aspect of jurisdiction, eliminating that possibility. So the judge can be sued for money because the judge has no immunity for violating the rights that we have under Title 38. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
So
which bell is that supposed to ring? Because I've been doing this for 17 years and I could probably name like a dozen cases.
So I have some questions. In regards to the due process that these judges are supposed to follow, right now we're just talking about veterans and their VA disability pensions, CRSC, or what have you, correct? Mm-hmm. Now, can you go after a judge for if he puts a PPO against you and you never got called into court? It's called right to face your accuser, which is in the Constitution.
What has happened with that is the judges just close ranks. It's the black robe mafia. And when you try to challenge that, they'll just completely turn it on a loop and say, oh, well, she thought she was in danger. Oh, well, she thought she was in danger. Oh, well, she thought she was. They just keep repeating it. They never give you the opportunity to say, but I have rights and you have no proof of any of this.
Huh. I know, but that's where you fall into.
There's also a CYA thing there, too.
Now, I was a process server in college, and I've been in the room when judges were talking to other judges, and they're like, hey, if we do this, it's going to be a huge fucking lawsuit, or it's going to cost all kinds of money. And you're right about the black cloak mafia.
Yep. Yeah, they just close ranks.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to penetrate.
We cannot get judges to admit the lack of jurisdiction on veteran benefits, because that would mean they would be admitting that they're personally liable for 35 years of predatory corruption and embezzlement and profiteering. We can't get lawyers to help us because they know that as soon as judges are required to basically obey because they can't get away with this anymore, as soon as judges get in trouble, lawyers are going to lose their paychecks. So they will not help us because every other lawyer in town will lose their paychecks at the same time. A huge amount. This is a multi-billion-dollar.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a money laundering operation.
And it's not just the lawyers industry, the states themselves. All right. The states themselves are making hundreds of millions of dollars. Some states are hundreds of millions. Washington, California, Texas, Michigan,
Connecticut, Pennsylvania,
Tennessee, hundreds of millions of dollars a year scamming veterans, scamming Social Security beneficiaries, going after active military housing allowance. All of these revolve around the same corruption that is within the whole family court system. The family court corruption itself is based on the money that the state makes. Lawyers are just profiteering on everybody because they weasel their way in and convince you to argue until you run out of money. And then they drop you like a hot potato because they already know the system is going to kill you.
Yeah. And most of them, like in my case, these judges do not want to have oral arguments.
Nope.
Inside these, they don't want to do it. So they have the opportunity and chance. These judges will file and they'll send the order or their opinion through the mail.
The sooner they get you off their
choice.
calendar, the sooner they can go home.
Absolutely. So it's kind of like that's why it's hard to go back to family court. You get, show cause hearings, this and that. And that's a lot of the reasons right there why these veterans will not go back to those courts.
Yep.
They won't go. So there's no justice at all, because the family court, like I said before in the last segment, they have little to zero accountability. Who do they account to?
That's the reason we're bringing this to the table, because you now have an opportunity to sue the judge who put you in jail, the judge who took your VA benefits, the judge who took your combat-related special compensation, the judge who looked at military retired pay and said that, well, veteran disability pay is the same thing as military pay, and that's a fraud. The judge committed fraud where he has no possibility of jurisdiction to say that. Looking at one of the cases that we've seen recently, now we all have a friend who, well, you guys know better because he's in your neighborhood, who was recently hammered for $190,000 in retaliation for having won a Supreme Court case, pointing out that the Supreme Court finally admitted that it had no jurisdiction to interfere with combat-related special compensation.
We're talking about the Michigan Supreme Court argument that took place.
Yeah, Ray Foster.
He unanimously 4 times he won,
and yet because of the flip and twist, they're going after him again because his case was not picked up at the Supreme Court. So they said that he lost on the merits of the case, and so they're turning it all around and backfiring it on top of him.
And they kicked it back to the district.
There's another case that's very similar, where they looked at the fact that DFAS came back and said, here is the remainder of the disposable retired pay, and it was like $400. And the state court said, well, he's got combat-related special compensation, and then he's got veteran benefits, and then he's got this and then that. So we think it's all concurrent retired disability pay, which means we can divide the whole retired pay. And so the state just committed this big fraud on top of the veteran. This is not unique, all right? Every single veteran that goes through this process, goes through the family court, is going to get hit by some mixture of these fraudulent claims. The state courts pretend to have jurisdiction, but they don't. So on one hand, we started off with filing federal suits against judges, and we've expanded that to look at filing state suits against the states themselves. After Torres versus Texas Department of Public Safety, we know that the state can be sued for violation of veteran rights. But we need to raise this to a level of understanding. In the Torres case, they were very careful not to look at jurisdiction, not to look at the whole of Title 38, because they knew that it would open a can of worms they weren't prepared to deal with. We have to open that can, and we have to pour all those damn worms on top of them. So, number one, we file the cases to the court. Number two, we have a bill that's been presented to quite a few members of Congress, everybody on the House and Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, to address this in the law. And we're hopefully working in the direction of getting a sit down with somebody at the executive level of the Department of Veterans Affairs, because Congress can solve this problem by fixing this one loophole and exposing the criminal misconduct of the state employees. Stop the embezzlement. The veterans will live, the families will do better, and everybody will be better.
But here's the thing is, if we're able to accomplish that and actually spank some of these judges, it'll trickle down into like the regular divorce court as well, to an extent. Because the minute the judges are proven to basically be corrupt, then that opens the lens to look at everything that judge has done.
Most of in the old days, before Title 4D was created, back in the year of the 1970s, when we had dinosaurs roaming the earth and so on, in order to get a divorce, you had to sue for some problem, adultery, theft, some criminal misconduct, or very specifically, physical and mental abuse, and mostly physical abuse, because they didn't care about mental abuse back then. They didn't acknowledge the existence.
It wasn't really a thing. Yeah,
it wasn't really a thing. So when they created this financial motivation for the states to use this, they shifted to a no-fault divorce environment, and that opened the door to the divorce industrial complex. That is what created this monster. So we get
no-fault divorce is the conveyor belt that runs this whole thing.
Yes, and it's okay to have a no-fault divorce in terms of no faulting the divorce. You get together, you get apart, that's fine. The problem that we're dealing with is the financial motivation for states to commit this fraud so they can make lots of money by destroying families.
Now, to what you're saying right there, like I mentioned earlier, I pulled a bunch of cases and had the chance to go through some of them. AI significantly increases my ability to research at speed. Most of what I'm seeing here, and in many of the appellate cases, HC versus Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, in regards to marriage of DI, Illinois 2018, one of the biggest factors is none of these judges, none of these courts, and none of the court bureaucrats, what do you call them, the guardian ad litem and all this, that, and the other, they do not hold to evidentiary standards. Now, in the United States of America, in other countries it's different. In the United States of America, you must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. You must provide substantive evidence that what you allege is true. And it is not on the person being accused to prove that they are innocent. But with the family courts in particular, the most egregious thing they do is make accusations without any substantiation at all. Zero evidentiary standards.
Yep. It makes it easier for them when they don't have to consider due process of law.
I consider that to be a weakness that we just haven't exploited en masse. One guy, me standing in front of a judge saying, "You haven't proven anything." That's not, the judge could just blow me off.
That's right.
But us banding together like this and starting to bring these cases to them, now there's a juggernaut coming at them as opposed to one poor guy standing in front of a bench.
But the thing, the courts, the divorce courts, they're no fault now. But then they turn around and they use fault for custody. And most of the time it's like, well, he's never home. He had to take care of the kids. Despite the fact that he's at work providing for the family.
That's the evidentiary standards I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They literally just make things up.
Correct.
So all of this revolves around the money that the states get for leveraging child support against welfare against us. And it's really hard to squeeze money out of a drug addict. It's really hard to squeeze money out of a guy in jail. It's really hard to squeeze money out of a dumbass. Unless the dumbass is rich, in which case you milk him for all he's got. But when it comes to it, the courts look at us and say, you're the dumbass for joining the military. You're the dumbass for having children you could never afford. And you're the dumbass for getting behind on the child support order, so we can take that. And what they do is they convert this into a debt that they write up on a scroll, and then they convert that over to a debt to the state. So it's no longer a debt to the ex, it's a debt to the state.
Watch Grunt Speak live every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to join Pop for Supporter Sundays, go to redonkulous.com/donate and make a monthly pledge. A link is in the meat caser box.